Beyond the Loop. Chapter 3. The Gears of Eden. The beach was no longer the sanctuary I had walked for 1,000 years. Under the moving stars, the sand had lost its warmth, turning into a gray, powdery ash that clung to our skin like the dust of a forgotten tomb. Behind us, the frozen ocean stood like a wall of jagged diamonds, motionless and terrifying. But ahead, the jungle had transformed. It was no longer a wall of green. It was a breathing, glowing labyrinth of shadows. Every step away from the shore felt like tearing a page out of a book. We were walking into the blank margins, the places where the loop had never intended for us to go. The stranger moved beside me like a man walking through a dream he couldn't control. He was no longer the titan of industry I had glimpsed in his eyes earlier. He was a child lost in a forest of giants. He kept looking back at the frozen sea, perhaps hopping to see a rescue boat break through the glass waves, or perhaps terrified that the ocean would suddenly shatter and swallow us both. His watch, that silver parasite on his wrist, continued its relentless tick-tock. It was the only heartbeat in a world that had forgotten how to pulse. As we crossed the threshold of the first palms, the scent changed. The salt and hibiscus were gone, replaced by something ancient and metallic, the smell of wet copper and deep, damp earth. The trees here were different. Their trunks weren't bark and wood, but a strange, translucent fiber that pulsed with a faint, bioluminescent veins. Pale green light surged through the roots like slow-moving lightning, illuminating the ground in rhythmic throbs. The leaves above us didn't rustle, they chimed. They were heavy, crystalline, and as they brushed against one another in the stagnant air, they produced a sound like a distant orchestra tuning its instruments. I watched the stranger reach out to touch a hanging vine. As his fingers made contact, the green light in the plant flared to a brilliant, blinding white. He recoiled, his face illuminated in a harsh, clinical glow. For a second, I saw the terror etched into every pore of his skin. He looked at his hand, then at the vine, then at me. His silence was louder than any scream. He was realizing that he wasn't just on an island. He was inside a machine, a living, breathing engine of time that had finally malfunctioned. We reached the base of the Great Banyan, the center of the island. But it was not the tree I remembered. The roots of the Great Banyan had pulled back, revealing a gaping maw in the earth. A staircase of obsidian led down into a throat of pulsing emerald light. From the depths, the sound of the between rose to greet us. It wasn't the sound of nature. It was the sound of a clockwork heart, a massive, rhythmic thrumming that shook the very marrow of my bones. The stranger stopped. He looked at the descent, then at his cracked watch. The second hand was spinning faster now, blurred by a speed that defied logic. He looked at me, and in the darkness, I saw a flash of his old self, the man who navigated storms and conquered markets. He took a breath, a deep, jagged lungful of the metallic air, and stepped toward the abyss. We descended. The air grew colder, sharper. The walls of the obsidian tunnel were covered in carvings, not of gods or animals, but of gears, celestial alignments, and endless, repeating circles. It was the blueprint of my prison. It was the map of the loop. I felt a sudden, sharp pain in my chest. To see the mechanics of my own existence was to realize that I was never a girl, never a daughter of the tide. I was a component, a ghost in the machine. At the bottom of the stairs, the tunnel opened into a cavern so vast it seemed to hold its own weather. In the center stood a monolith of bronze and light, a tower of interlocking rings that spun in different directions, some slow as the growth of a mountain, others fast as the wings of a hummingbird. In the center of the rings, suspended in a sphere of violet fire, was a shadow. The stranger gasped a sharp, choked sound. He walked toward the monolith as if hypnotized. He wasn't looking at the machine. He was looking at the shadow inside the fire. He froze. His hand went to his chest, clutching the fabric of his shirt. The shadow in the fire shifted, taking a form that was agonizingly familiar to him. A woman, Sarah, the name he had whispered in his sleep. She was there, held in the heart of the island's engine, a soul caught in the gears. I realized then that Elias Thorne hadn't crashed here by accident. He had been pulled. The island didn't want a guest. It wanted a replacement. The rings of the monolith ground to a halt with a sound that felt like the world's spine snapping. The violet fire flickered. The green light in the vines turned a blood red. The machine had recognized him. And as the silence returned, heavier and colder than before, I realized that the first night was not just a pause. It was a transition. The island was hungry, and Elias was the feast.